Hello children, welcome to online classes. Today I am going to explain some important points from D and F block elements, metallurgy, coordination compounds and polymers. First, D block elements. Elements in which the differentiating electron enters into D subshell called D block elements. So, the last electron which is entering into an atom is called differentiating electron. In the periodic table, D block elements are present between S and P block. So, in this periodic table, this is S block, P block, D block and F block. So, in D block total 10 groups are present in 4 periods, 10 groups and 4 periods. In each period 10 elements. So, 10 into 4 total 40 D block elements are there. The differentiating electron enters into D subshell, but that is belonging to penultimate shell n minus 1 shell. So, differentiating electron enters into n minus 1 D subshell. The general electronic configuration of D block elements, n minus 1 D takes electrons from 1 to 10 ns in the S subshell of the valence shell. In some cases 1 electron also may be there, in some other cases 2 electrons. So, this is the general electronic configuration. N may be 4, 5, 6, 7. When n is equal to 4, the differentiating electron enters into 3D subshell. That is why those 10 elements are called 3D series, scandium to zinc. Like that, when n is equal to 5, 4D series, 5D series and 6D series. In each series 10 elements are present. Next, transition elements. Transition elements. All D block elements are not considered transition elements. Based on the particular properties, characteristic properties, elements are divided into 4 types: representative elements, inert gas elements, transition elements and inner transition elements. So, to become transition elements, they should exhibit certain specific characteristic properties like exhibiting color, paramagnetic nature, etc. To become transition element, at least one unpaired d electron should be there. Unpaired d electron. So, n minus 1 d subshell must be incomplete. So, 1 to 9, then only such type of element can exhibit the characteristic properties of transition element. So, that is considered transition element. If you take 12th group, zinc, cadmium and mercury. In these elements, the n minus 1 d is completely filled with 10 electrons, ns2. That is why even in their stable oxidation state like Zn2 plus, 3d 10 electronic configuration is there. So, the zinc, cadmium, mercury, they do not exhibit the characteristic properties of transition elements. That is why 12th group elements zinc, cadmium, mercury are D block elements, but not transition elements. They are not considered transition elements, that you have to remember. So, all transition elements are D block, but all D block elements are not transition elements. Next, coming to the specific properties, characteristic properties of D block elements, especially oxidation state or electronic configuration. Oxidation state based on the electronic configuration. If you take titanium after argon 18, 3D to 4s2. Generally, valence electrons are participated in the bond formation. So, Ns electrons, 2 out of 2 are involved in the bond formation. So, the smallest oxidation state for titanium plus 2. Along with plus 2, as the energy gap between n minus 1 d and ns orbitals is very less, the energy gap almost both are equal. So, along with the ns electrons, n minus 1 d electron also may be participated. Out of n minus 1 d 3d, 1 electron may be participated along with 4s electrons. So, titanium may exhibit plus 2 as well as plus 3. Sometimes even 2 out of 2 3d electrons also may participate in the bond formation. At that time, plus 4 oxidation state. So, along with ns electrons, n minus 1 d unpaired electrons also participate in the bond formation. If you take manganese atomic number 25, electronic configuration 3d5 4s2 after argon. So, first these 2 electrons are participated in the bond formation plus 2, along with the 2 4s electrons, 1 by 1 d electrons also may participate in the bond formation. So, 2 plus 1 3, 2 plus 2 4, 5, 6, 7. So, maximum oxidation state exhibited by manganese equal to ns electrons and n minus 1 d unpaired electrons. So, plus 7, example in MnO4 minus, its oxidation state is plus 7. Coming to chromium and copper, they have some abnormal electronic configuration. In order to get stability, they oppose Aufbau principle, they deviate from Aufbau principle. For chromium, atomic number is 24. After argon, we can write it as 4s2 and 3d4. So, when subshell is exactly off filled, the atom gets additional stability. That is why, even though opposing Aufbau principle, one electron is de-excited from 4s orbital to 3d subshell to make it exactly off filled subshell 3d5 4s1. This is electronic configuration of chromium. This is opposite to, it is violating Aufbau principle. That is why it is called abnormal electronic configuration. Same thing for copper group also, 3d10 4s1. This is the electronic configuration. This is also opposite to Aufbau principle. So, chromium group and copper group can have abnormal electronic configurations. They have ns1 configuration. That is why the minimum oxidation state exhibited by chromium or copper is plus 1. So, for the specialty variable oxidation states, d block elements can exhibit some characteristic properties like variable configuration, variable oxidation states, and they exhibit colors. Colored compounds are formed by d block elements, that is due to d orbital splitting and dd electron transition complex. The d block elements can form complex compounds, they exhibit color. At the same time, d block elements can exhibit paramagnetic nature also. So, you observe the color. When d block element absorbs one color from visible light, dd electron transition takes place. So, one color when it is missed from white light, the remaining all 6 colors together can exhibit another color. Both are called complementary colors. So, you observe the tabular form. Violet color, when the d block substance absorbs violet color, the complementary color is yellow. So, the substance appears in yellow color. Similarly, blue, orange, green, red, yellow, violet, orange, blue, like this you can observe. Magnetic properties. Compounds formed by d block elements generally exhibit magnetic properties, paramagnetic nature. If one or more unpaired electrons are there, the substance becomes paramagnetic substance. Magnetic moment is due to presence of one or more unpaired electrons. When n is equal to 1, the magnetic moment is calculated by the formula under root n into n plus 2 Bohr magnetons. If one unpaired electron is there, the magnetic moment is 1.73 Bohr magnetons. if n is equal to 1, n is equal to 2, 2.84, n is equal to 3, 3.87, n is equal to 4, 4.90, n is equal to 5, 5.92, like that. If n is equal to 0, no unpaired electrons, magnetic moment also 0, then the substance becomes diamagnetic. So, generally d block elements can have one or more unpaired d electrons, that is why they exhibit magnetic properties. Example, if you take copper, the electronic configuration of copper is 3d10 4s1. Because of one unpaired electron, it exhibits paramagnetic moment. Cu1 plus cuprous ion. So, when we are removing electrons from d block atom, must be removed from ns orbital. The differentiating electron, the last electron enters into the atom of d block element is d, but during the removal electron must be removed from s. So, first you remove s electron, then the electronic configuration of cuprous ion is 3d10 4s0, number of unpaired electrons 0, that is why cuprous salts like cuprous chloride is diamagnetic. Cupric ion, if you take, one more electron must be removed now from 3d. So, the electronic configuration of cupric ion is 3d10 4s0, number of unpaired electrons 1. So, cupric salts like cupric oxide, cupric chloride are paramagnetic with magnetic moment 1.73 Bohr magnetons because of one unpaired electron. So, this is the method how to calculate the number of unpaired electrons in d block ion, metal ion, and then magnetic moment. Catalytic properties. D block elements generally act as catalyst. The reason, presence of empty d orbitals, vacancies, empty vacancies on the surface of d block metal and exhibiting variable oxidation states. These are the reasons why d block elements act as catalysts. Now, coming to the periodic trends, atomic size gradually decreased, but the decrease in atomic size in d block period is less, that is due to shielding effect of n minus 1d. Just you go through the periodic properties, gradation in the atomic size, density, boiling point, melting point, just you collect the periodic trends. F block elements, the elements in which the differentiating electron enters into F subshell, F subshell belonging to n minus 1, n minus 2 anti penultimate shell. So, in these elements differentiating electron enters into n minus 2 F subshell. So, F subshell can take up to 14 electrons. So, this type of variation in the electronic configuration we can observe. These elements are called F block elements. These are also called inner transition elements, since these are present between two transition elements. In the periodic table, these are arranged between two transition elements. That is why these are also called inner transition elements. Almost all F block elements are inner transition elements. F block elements are placed below the periodic table. These are all belonging to third group. F block elements are in two series, lanthanoids and actinoids. The general electronic configuration of F block elements, n minus 2 F 1 to 14, n minus 1 D also takes electrons 0 to 1, ns2. This is electronic configuration. So, here n may be 6 or 7. When n is equal to 6, the differentiating electron enters into 4f. So, these 14 elements are called 4f series or lanthanoids. If n is equal to 7, the differentiating electron enters into 5f, 5f1 to 14. The elements are called 5f series. So, actinoids also called 5f series. Lanthanoids start from cerium 58 ends with lutetium 71. Actinides starts from thorium 92 103, thorium 2 lawrencium, thorium 2 lawrencium. These 14 elements are called actinoids. These are also called 5F series. So, maximum number of actinoids are radioactive elements. So, after uranium 92, all are man-made elements, radioactive elements, and lanthanides are also called rare earths since they occur rarely in the Earth's crust. Atomic size and ionic sizes from cerium to lutetium or thorium to lawrencium. Atomic size or ionic size gradually decreased. Such type of reduction in the atomic size as well as ionic size in the elements of lanthanoids as atomic number increases is called specially lanthanoid contraction. Similarly, the gradual decrease in atomic size or ionic size in actinoids is called actinoid contraction. So, the lanthanoid contraction is due to poor shielding effect of 4f electrons. Similarly, actinoid contraction is due to poor shielding effect of 5f electrons. So, the degree of contraction is more in actinoids when compared with lanthanoids. So, atomic size, you can observe the trend in the decrease in atomic size. Consequences of lanthanoid, what happens due to lanthanoid contraction? From lanthanum plus 3 to lutetium plus 3. So, D block, F block elements generally exhibit the oxidation state, common oxidation state plus 3. Lanthanum plus 3 to lutetium plus 3, the ionic radii change from 106 to 85 picometer. Since all the members have almost similar size, it is difficult to separate them from the mixture. The small average decrease in atomic size is responsible for the small decrease in electronegativity and standard electrode potentials of lanthanides. The basic character of oxides and hydroxides decrease from lanthanum to lithium hydroxide. So, because of lanthanide contraction, one more observation in the D block. In D block period group, from top to bottom atomic size is increased generally, but from 3D to 4D series atomic size is increased, but 4D to 5D, even though one shell is extra increased, there is no increase in the atomic size. You observe 160 zirconium, next element of the next period hafnium having almost same atomic size. So, from top to bottom in a group atomic size is increased, but in this case from 4D to 5D there is no increase in the atomic size. So, this is because of the lanthanoid contraction. 14 lanthanides are present between zirconium and hafnium. So, in those 14 lanthanides atomic size gradually decreased. So, the increase in size due to extra shell is compensated by lanthanide contraction. That is why 4D and 5D series elements of 4D and 5D series elements can have same atomic size and more similarities in their properties. At the same time, if you take ionization potential, actually from top to bottom ionization potential decreased due to increase in size, but here atomic size remains same from 4D to 5D, but ionization potential not remain same also, it is increased due to extra nuclear charge. Oxidation state, lanthanides, NS2 electrons definitely involved in the bond formation. At the same time, N-1 d electrons also involve. Along with NS, n minus 1 d electrons. These two are considered valence electrons. That's why common oxidation state exhibited by lanthanides and actinides is +3. Along with these electrons, n minus 2 f electrons also may be participated. That's why they exhibit variable oxidation states like d block elements +4, +5, +6 like that. So coming to actinides, actinides also same. These are in these elements differentiating electron enters into phi f subshell. All actinoids are radioactive. The elements which follow uranium, which are coming after uranium, are called transuranium element, transuranic elements. From 93 onwards, they are all synthetic or man-made elements. So electronic configuration of actinoids also same, 5f 1 to 14, 6d 0 to 1, 7s2. Since the differentiating electron enters into 5f subshell, these are also called 5f series. The common oxidation state is +3. Ionic size, same thing similar to lanthanides. Atomic size as well as ionic size gradually decreased as atomic number increases in lanthanoids. That is specially called actinoid contraction. If it is happened in lanthanide, that is called lanthanide contraction. This is also actinide contraction because of the poor shielding effect of 5f electrons. Nuclear charge is increased, effective nuclear charge increase, that can pull the valence electrons more towards the nucleus. That is why decrease in the atomic size and ionic size we can observe. So coming to the next topic, metallurgy. Metallurgy is the branch of science in which we can learn about the extraction of metals from minerals. So generally metals exist, the metals do not exist in their native state, they exist in combined state. Example, sodium. Sodium being highly reactive, it cannot exist as sodium element, it exists as sodium chloride, rock salt. So rock salt is the mineral of sodium. So the minerals are the compounds in which metal is present in positive oxidation state. The process used for isolation of the metal from its ore is known as metallurgy. The naturally occurring compounds of metals in the earth's crust which are obtained by mining are called minerals. So the naturally occurring compounds of metals in the earth's crust which are obtained by mining are called minerals. But metals are not extracted commercially from all minerals. From one of the minerals, metal is extracted more profitably, more commercially. Such type of mineral is called ore. So aluminum occurs in cryolite, bauxite, etc. But from bauxite, aluminum is extracted mainly. That's why bauxite is the ore of aluminum. The unwanted impurities which are present in the ore called gangue or matrix. There is some terminology in metallurgy. Example, mud, stones, sand, etc. The extraction and isolation of metals from ores involves the following steps. First, concentration of the ore by removing all impurities by selecting suitable method. When impurities are removed from the ore, that process is called concentration of the ore or purification of the ore. Next, after the concentration, from the concentrated ore, some pre-treatment is there like calcination and roasting before going to the reduction. First, from minerals, ore is selected, ore is purified or concentrated. After the purification, from the ore, metal is extracted by the reduction. Metal is extracted from by the reduction process. Sometimes before the reduction only, ore is subjected to roasting, calcination or smelting. They are pre-treatment of the ore. Next, isolation, extraction of the metal from concentrated ore. That process is called reduction. Next, after getting metal that will not be in purest form, that is raw metal that contains impurities. So, removal of impurities from raw metal is called purification, refining of the metal. So, three steps mainly: first, concentration of ore; second, reduction of mineral ore to get metal in impure form; next, purification of metal. So, you observe some minerals: aluminum, bauxite is the ore, iron, hematite, magnetite, siderite, iron pyrites, etc. Copper, copper pyrites, malachite, cuprite, copper glass, zinc, zinc blende, ZNS, calamine, zincite. Removal of unwanted materials like sand, clay, etc. from the ore is called concentration. It is also called dressing of the ore. So, there are specific methods based on the difference in certain physical properties of gangue and mineral. If both are differ in the specific gravity, we can use gravity separation or hydraulic washing. Similarly, if impurities or mineral, both are any one of both having magnetic properties, we can use magnetic separation method. If froth flotation, lighter particles, lighter mineral particles are present, such type of ore is concentrated by froth flotation. Sulfide minerals are subjected to concentration by froth flotation. Similarly, leaching by using solvent. Extraction of crude metal, raw metal from concentrated ore. There are two steps. First, conversion into oxide, because from oxide ore it is easy to extract the metal by the reduction process. That is why, even though that is in the form of sulfide ore, suppose zinc sulfide is there, zinc sulfide first converted into zinc oxide by roasting. So, if already ore is in oxide form, no problem. But if oxide ore is not there, if other than oxide ore is there, that should be subjected to calcination or roasting according to the conditions to convert into oxide ore. From the oxide ore, metal is extracted by the reduction of oxide ore. So, conversion to oxide ore first step, then reduction of the oxide ore to get crude metal. Conversion into oxide can be done by two methods. One is calcination, another one is roasting. Calcination is the process of heating the ore below its melting point in the absence of air. Suppose limestone is there. From limestone it is not easy to extract calcium, that is why it is subjected to calcination. In the absence of air, when it is heated below its melting point, it splits into CaO and CO2. So, volatile gases are removed along with some impurities also. Then we can get calcium oxide. From the calcium oxide, by using particular reducing agent, we can extract calcium by removing oxygen. Decomposition of the ore takes place during the calcination process. Roasting, another method. The process of heating the ore below its melting point with excess of air, called roasting. Oxidation of the ore takes place during the roasting. So, example, zinc sulfide, on heating with excess of oxygen, zinc sulfide converted into zinc oxide. This is roasting. Next, after the calcination or roasting, after getting oxide mineral, oxide ore, from the oxide ore, by removing oxygen, by the reduction of the oxide ore, we can get the crude metal. The roasted ores can give the crude metals. Next one, pyrometallurgy. from some minerals or ores, metal is extracted by heating the concentrated ore at high temperature. Just by heating the ore, concentrated ore, we can extract metals without using reducing agent or electrolytic reduction methods. Directly by heating to high temperature from some ores, we can extract metals. That process is specially called pyrometallurgy. Smelting is specific method. In this method, at a time we can remove impurities as well as we can extract the metal in molten state. So, when impurities are in non-fusible, if the impurities have high melting point, fusion is very difficult. Such type of impurities can be removed from the mineral by smelting process. So, it is a process of extracting impure molten metal. In this method, metal is extracted in molten state from its ore at high temperature using a suitable flux and a reducing agent. A flux is a chemical substance added to the concentrated ore during the smelting in order to remove the gangue. So, gangue is the impurity present in ore, or gangue also called matrix. This gangue is infusible gangue, melting point is very high. So, such type of gangue is converted into fusible mass. At the same time, as reducing agent is also added, from oxide ore we can get metal. So, one shot two birds, like that. In this method we can remove impurities as well as we can extract metal in molten state. So, ore which contains gangue, to this flux is added. Flux may be acidic flux, basic flux, that depends on the ore, and reducing agent heated to high temperature like in blast furnace. At this time, ore get reduced to metal in molten state. At the same time, the gangue, which is infusible gangue, by reacting with flux converted into fusible mass, easily fusible mass. So, both are separated by the difference in specific gravity. Molten metal and fusible mass both are separated. So, the entire process is called smelting. A slag is a waste product formed by the combination of flux and a gangue during the extraction of metals by smelting. Thermodynamics process. For all spontaneous processes, Gibbs free energy change is negative and is given by the equation delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. So, whenever delta G value is negative, that reaction occurs on its own. So, during the extraction of metal from metal oxide by using certain reducing agent, the reaction should be spontaneous, then only metal is extracted spontaneously. So, extraction of copper from cuprous oxide, this is a specific method. Copper sulphide, on heating with oxygen we can get copper oxide. This copper oxide, when reduced with carbon coke, we can get copper. Actual process is carried out in reverberatory furnace. So, if you observe, FeO combines with SiO2, this is basic oxide, this is acidic oxide, then we can get fusible mass slag, that is ferrous silicate. Ferrous sulphide, if any ferrous sulphide is there, that undergoes oxidation to give ferrous oxide by the removal of vapors of sulfur dioxide. This ferrous oxide, also being basic oxide, combines with the flux forming ferrous silicate slag. Next, cuprous sulphide undergoes roasting to give cuprous oxide. The unreacted cuprous sulphide itself, it acts as reducing agent and it reduces cuprous oxide. So here self reduction, auto reduction takes place, Cu2O being oxidized by cuprous sulfide only. This is very important one. The solidified copper obtained has blistered appearance due to the evolution of glasses. That's why the copper which is obtained here due to presence of small pores, this is called blister copper. Similarly, extraction of zinc from zinc oxide from zinc blend on roasting, we can get zinc oxide. After getting zinc oxide, it is subjected to reduction by coke at high temperature 1673 Kelvin. It loses oxygen and becomes zinc. So reduction of zinc oxide can be done by coke at 1673 Kelvin. Then only spontaneous reaction delta G is negative. The metal is distilled and collected by rapid chilling. The process of extraction of metals by electrolysis. If reducing agent is not suitable from such type of metal oxides, metal is extracted by the electrolytic reduction. Electrolysis of their fused salts is called electrometallurgy. So from metal oxide we can get metal by the reduction by using certain reducing agents like coke, or can be extracted metal just by heating to high temperature, that is pyrometallurgy. Sometimes metal is extracted by the electrolysis of fused metal oxide, that is called electrometallurgy. First group metals generally extracted from their minerals by electrometallurgy. Extraction of aluminum from alumina. The process of obtaining aluminum by the electrolysis of mixture of purified alumina Al2O3 and cryolite is specially called Hall-Héroult process. That is electrolytic method. The overall reaction when Al2O3 alumina is subjected to reduction by coke, it loses oxygen and becomes aluminum. The oxygen combines with coke forming carbon dioxide as well as carbon monoxide also. In the electrolysis process at cathode, Al3 plus, which is in molten state, takes electrons at cathode, because cathode is the electrode of excess of electrons. So Al3 plus undergoes reduction to give aluminum in molten state that can be removed from the vessel. At anode, since graphite rods are used as anode, O2 minus ion, which is in molten state, combines with the carbon coke forming carbon monoxide. So these electrons have been taken by anode. Similarly, carbon dioxide also may be obtained. After getting carbon monoxide also, that may be converted into carbon dioxide. So as coke, which is graphite rods, are used as anode in this process, as graphite is involved in the reaction, oxidation reaction of anode, the amount of the graphite slowly getting reduced. That's why in this Hall-Héroult process, graphite rods must be replaced time to time. Next, extraction of gold and silver, very important method. Native zinc, native silver or gold ore is treated with solution of sodium cyanide in the presence of excess air to give a soluble complex. When the mineral impurities are there in the mineral, gold or silver may be in native state, but along with other impurities it is present. So in order to remove the impurities which are present along with the native gold or silver, the process is used. In this method, the impure silver or gold ore is treated with sodium cyanide aqueous solution in the presence of excess of oxygen. At that time, whatever the silver or gold present in the mineral entered into the solution in the form of soluble complex argentocyanide or auric cyanide. From the solution we can get back our beloved silver or gold by adding higher electropositive metal. The process of purifying crude metal is called refining. So, in the previous case, when the solution is obtained, auric cyanide solution is obtained to this higher electropositive metal, zinc is more electropositive when compared with gold. So, gold is substituted by zinc, gold is extracted in this way. This is called MacArthur-Forrest process. The process of purifying the crude metal to get purest form of metal is called metal refining. The metal refining is done with many techniques like distillation, like zinc, copper, zinc, mercury, they are subjected to distillation to get pure form. Liquation, electrolysis method, zone refining, vapor phase refining, or even chromatographic methods are used for the metal refining. Distillation, in this technique impure metal is subjected to distillation. The pure metal vaporizes and vapors are collected and condensed to get metal in pure state. The liquation, this method is employed in the case of low melting metals, when metal is having low melting point when compared with impurity metal. When it is heated to high temperature, first metal is liquefied, leaving behind a solid impurity metal. Electrolytic refining, this is very common method used for the refining of metals. In this method, the impure metal should be taken as anode and pure metal is taken as cathode. The electrolyte is nothing but a solution containing metal, the solution of soluble salt. So, for the purification of zinc, the solution of zinc chloride we can use. Refining of metals, some named reactions, some specific methods are there: Mond's process and Van Arkel process. In Mond's process, nickel is subjected to refining. Nickel, the impure nickel is heated with carbon monoxide gas. So, carbonyl can form strong bond with the central metal atom due to synergic effect. So, metal carbonyl complexes are formed when carbon monoxide is passed on to impure metal around 350 Kelvin temperature. A stable nickel carbonyl, nickel tetracarbonyl complex is formed. This is stable one because between nickel and carbon monoxide a strong bond, sigma and pi bond, both are formed, that is synergic effect. So, after the formation of nickel tetracarbonyl, the vapors are separated, passed into another room and then heated to very high temperature. So, at this high temperature metal cannot exist. At particular temperature around 350, carbon monoxide combines with nickel forming nickel tetracarbonyl, but very high temperature, at very high temperature nickel tetracarbonyl undergo decomposition to give nickel metal and carbon monoxide is escaped. So, like this we can purify nickel. So, other impurity metals won't combine with carbon monoxide, they remain in the form of metals only, in the form of solid. Van Arkel method, this method is used for the removal of oxygen and nitrogen present in the metals like zirconium and titanium. For the impure metal, iodine is added, then we can get zirconium iodide at 870 Kelvin temperature. The zirconium iodide, after the formation of zirconium iodide, other metals won't combine with iodine, they are left over in the vessel only. After the formation of zirconium tetraiodide, that is separated from that vessel and heated to high temperature. At that time iodine vapors are removed, leaving behind pure zirconium. Same method is applied for titanium, for the purification of titanium metal also. First titanium reacts with iodine forming titanium tetraiodide. The tetraiodide at high temperature decomposes to give titanium solid and iodine vapors. Coming to the coordination compounds, the coordination compounds and double salts, the formation is similar. Double salt and complex salt, the difference, main difference, double salt is formed by the combination of two salts. At the same time, complex compound also formed by the combination of two salts. When double salt is dissolved in water, it undergoes ionization completely to give all types of ions present in it. But whereas complex salt won't undergo complete ionization to give all types of ions present in it. So, potash alum, in the solid state it has K plus ions, Al3 plus ions and SO4 2 minus ions. Three types of ions are present in the solid state. When it is dissolved in water, it splits into three types of ions, that is double salt. Same thing Morse salt also. Complex salt, example potassium ferrocyanide, if you take, in potassium ferrocyanide there are three types of ions, K plus, Fe2 plus and Cn minus in solid state. When this is dissolved in water, excess of water, it undergoes ionization, but it won't give all types of ions. It can give potassium ions and ferrocyanide ions instead of Fe2 plus and Cn minus. So, even though in water between Fe2 plus and Cn minus ions, certain non-ionizable bond is present. Even though both are ions, oppositely charged ions, along with ionic bond in between them, non-ionizable coordinate covalent bond is present. That's why these are called coordination compounds. So, terminology, coordination entity. So, when complex is dissolved in water, the central metal atom along with its ligands can exist as one unit. So, that is called coordination entity. When we are representing the formula, central atom along with its ligands is represented within the square bracket, that is coordination entity. Some ions which are present outside of the coordination sphere, coordination entity, are called counter ions. They are ionized when dissolved in water. Central atom, the metal atom, generally D block metal atom present at the center of complex, or ion present at the center of complex is called central metal atom or ion. Example, in potassium ferricyanide, Fe3 plus is the central metal ion. In nickel tetracarbonyl, central metal atom is nickel. Ligand is a molecule or ion which has at least one lone pair and forms dative bond with the central metal atom of a complex is called ligand. Since it is electron pair donor, it is also Lewis base. Types of ligand based on the charge. Some ligands can have negative charge, they are anionic ligands, neutral ligands. Ligand, to become ligand, definitely lone pair is required. So, in cationic ligands, NO plus N2H5 plus hydrogenium ion. Next, classification of ligands based on the denticity. Denticity is the number of dative bonds, coordinate covalent bonds formed by one ligand is called denticity of the ligand. So, some ligands can form only one dative bond. They are called monodentate or unidentate ligands. Example, some ligands, single ligand molecule or ion can form two dative bonds. They are called bidentate ligands. Example, ethane 1,2-diamine. Next, polydentate, more than two dative bonds formed by single ligand. They are called polydentate ligand. So, example, diethylene triamine. So, in this case, there are three donor atoms in the form of 3 NH2 groups. That's why single ligand diethylene triamine can form three dative bonds with the central metal atom, that is tridentate ligand. If you take ethylene diamine tetraacetate, single ligand can form 6 dative bonds, 4 dative bonds through O minus of acetate and 2 dative bonds through nitrogen. So, totally EDTA can form 6 dative bonds, that's why it is hexadentate ligand. When a ligand uses its 2 or more donor atoms to bind a single metal ion to form ring complexes, it is called chelate ligand. So even ethylene diamine also can form ring with central metal atom like this. So this is chelate ligand. So chelate ligands, when chelate ligands are present, complex becomes stable. Ambidentate ligand, it is nothing but a monodentate ligand, but it has two types of donor sites, donor atoms. If you take NO2, it is having two donor atoms, one is O minus, other one is nitrogen. So it can donate one dative bond, it cannot form two dative bonds. This is monodentate only. It can donate either with lone pair of the nitrogen or with lone pair of oxygen. So when it is forming dative bond with nitrogen, this is called nitrito-N. When it is forming dative bond with O, called nitrito-O. Coordination number of dative bonds formed by one single metal atom is called coordination number. Coordination number is characteristic of a metal. So silver Ag plus always forms two coordinate covalent bonds. That's why its coordination number is 2. For copper it is 4. For iron it is 6. Generally coordination number is fixed. But for some metals like platinum, according to the situation, they can exhibit two types of coordination numbers. So coming to the nomenclature, naming of the cationic complexes. In cationic complex, coordination entity has positive charge and counter anions are present. Example, CO, NH32, H2O4, Cl3. Here two types of ligands, amine and aqua, and the oxidation number of cobalt is +3. 3 chloride ions which are present outside of the coordination entity are counter anions. The charge present on the coordination entity is positive, that's why it is called cationic complex. First you write the names of ligands in alphabetical order by mentioning their number. So diamine, since two ammonia ligands are there, diamine. 4 aqua, tetra aqua. In alphabetical order you have to arrange tetra aqua. After that central metal atom is cobalt. You write the name of the central metal atom and mention the oxidation number in Roman numericals in the bracket. 3. Then you write the name of counter anion, singular. Even though 3 anions are there, you have to write only singular because this is not ligand. You have to mention the number of ligands only, not number of counter ions. Just chloride is enough, no need to write trichloride. Neutral complexes. Neutral complexes. If the charge present on the coordination number is 0. Suppose CO, NH33, Br3. So in this case oxidation number of the cobalt is 3. The total charge present on the coordination entity is 0. No counter ion present outside. First you write the amines, triamine. There are 3 bromide ligands now. Br minus is not counter ion, this is ligand, that's why tribromido. Tribromido. Then cobalt, its oxidation number is 3. That's all. Nickel tetracarbonyl, this is a common name. Here nickel is a central metal atom. Since carbon monoxide is neutral ligand, the oxidation number is 0. So tetracarbonyl, nickel, tetracarbonyl, nickel 0. The overall charge present on the coordination entity is 0, that's why it is neutral. Next one, anionic complexes. anionic complexes. For these complexes, the negative charge is present on the coordination entity. Example K4FeCN6. Since 4 K plus ions are present outside, counter cations, the complex is anion, here counter ion is cation. 4 units of negative charge is present. So for anionic complexes, first you write the single or name of the counter cation without mentioning the number. So here the cation is potassium. Don't write tetrapotassium. Potassium. Then hexacyanido. First you write the names of ligand along with their number. Hexacyano or cyanido. This is latest method, cyanido. Then the central metal atom is iron or ferrum. Its oxidation state is +2. Remember, in anionic complexes, central metal atom, name of the central metal atom ends with ATE. At that time, better you take the Latin word ferrum, ferrate. The oxidation number is mentioned in the bracket 2. Potassium hexacyanidoferrate 2. Next, isomerism in coordination compounds. Isomers are 2 or more than 2 different compounds with same molecular formula. The isomers are 2 types, structural isomers and stereoisomers. Here stereoisomers are 2 types, geometrical isomers and optical isomers. Coming to structural isomerism, structure only different for 2 isomers. These are divided into various types. First, ionization isomerism. Ionization isomerism. So if you observe these 2 complexes, both are having same molecular formula, but both are different in their color, properties, etc. So when first one is dissolved in water, it gives sulfate anion and coordination sphere with 2 units of positive charge. When the next one is dissolved in water, it produces bromide ions and coordination entity with 1 unit positive charge. So both the salts complexes are differ in their mode of ionization. That's why they are called ionization isomerism. So to identify whether it is exhibiting ionization isomerism or not, how to identify? Exchangeable counter anion and anionic ligand must be there. Anionic ligand and counter anion both must be exchangeable. Next, solvate isomerism. If H2O molecules are present in the complex, that exhibits solvate isomerism. In the first compound, there is no hydrate in the interstitial sites of the complex, but in the second one, there is one hydrate molecule. So these 2 complexes are differ in the number of hydrate molecules which are present inside of the interstitial sites. They are solvate. So these are almost like ionization isomers. Next, linkage isomerism. 2 complexes which are differ in the linking atom of ambidentate ligand. So in the first compound, through NO2 is attached to the central metal atom. This is nitrite N. In the second complex, through oxygen, it is attached to the central metal atom, central metal ion. That's why both are formed due to difference in the linking atom of ambidentate ligand. Since 2 complexes are formed, they are called linkage isomers, and the phenomena is linkage isomerism. Next, coordination isomerism. This is exhibited by polynuclear complexes. Complex which has 2 or more than 2 central metal atoms called polynuclear complex. So these are formed due to exchange of ligands between 2 central metal atoms. Stereoisomerism. Isomers are formed due to difference in the orientation of ligands in space around the central atom. First, geometrical isomerism. Geometrical isomerism is exhibited by complexes with coordination number 4, square planar complexes, not tetrahedral complexes. So due to difference in the distance between, due to difference in the angle between ligands, geometrical isomers are produced. With coordination number 4, MA2B2, MA2BC and MABCD, the complexes having this formula can exhibit geometrical isomerism. If you take Ma2B2, here two chlorines are closer to each other with bond angle 90 degrees square planar, but in the next one, two identical ligands are far away from one another, the angle is 180 degrees. So due to difference in the distance or angle between two identical ligands, we can say cis isomer and trans isomer. Similarly, MABCD, so you keep the A constant and keep on changing the opposite one, you can get three types of ligand complexes. Next, with coordination number 6, Ma4B2 or Ma4BC can exhibit this type of geometrical isomerism. Here two chlorines are on adjacent positions, making the angle 90. In the next one, two identical ligands are away from one another, making angle 180. So first one is cis, second one is trans. Similarly, MAA2. So in place of 4 monodentate ligands, 2 bidentate ligands we can take. So here two chlorines are closer to each other, away from one another, cis and trans. Ma3B3 or Ma3BCD type of complexes also can exhibit geometrical isomerism. In this complex, 3 identical ligands are occupying the trigonal face of the octahedron. That isomer is called facial isomer. In another one, those 3 identical ligands are occupying meridian of the octahedron. They are called meridional isomer. Optical isomerism. These optical isomers are having same molecular formula, same properties, but they differ in rotating plane of polarized light. At the same time, optical isomers are non-superimposable molecules. So, to define optical isomers, compounds with same molecular formula but differ in rotating plane of polarized light and non-superimposable one on another. So non-superimposable molecules of same molecular formula differ in rotating plane of polarized light called optical isomers. If these two isomers are exactly mirror images, they are also called enantiomers. So in between, generally complex, octahedral complex with bidentate ligands can exhibit optical isomerism due to lack of symmetry. So to exhibit optical isomerism, essential condition, complex molecule should not have any symmetry. So if you observe these two molecules, both are non-superimposable. One rotates plane of polarized light towards right side, other one rotates towards left side. They are optical isomers and non-superimposable, exactly mirror images. That's why they are also called enantiomers. So coming to the theories of complexes, first theory proposed by Alfred Werner. According to this theory, central metal atom has two types of valencies, primary valency and secondary valency. Primary valency generally equal to oxidation number of the central metal atom, while secondary valency is equal to coordination number. Primary valency is ionizable, while secondary valency is non-ionizable. Primary valency is non-directional, while secondary valency is directional, and it gives shape, geometry to the complex. Primary valency is satisfied by only negatively charged ions, but secondary valency is satisfied by any type of compound. Next, coming to valence bond theory. According to the valence bond theory, covalent bond is formed, coordinate covalent bond is formed by the overlapping of completely filled orbital of the ligand with empty orbital of the central metal atom. So due to overlapping of completely filled orbital of ligand with empty orbital of central metal atom, coordinate covalent bond is formed between ligand and central metal atom. Central metal atom has to provide sufficient number of empty orbitals. If 4 is the coordination number, it has to provide 4 empty orbitals. They undergo hybridization. The orbitals available n-1 d orbitals, ns orbitals, np orbitals and nd orbitals. So d orbitals are two types: d orbitals of outer orbit and d orbitals of inner orbit. If coordination number is 4, if the ligand approaching is strong field ligand like Cn minus CO NH3 En, when strong field ligands are approaching, n minus 1 d orbital only involved in the bond formation by forcible pairing. So d sp2 hybridization is taking place at that time, square planar shape, 90 degrees bond angle. If weak field ligand like F minus is approaching, ns orbital and 3 p orbitals only involved in the hybridization, sp3 hybridization takes place. The shape of the complex is tetrahedral and the bond angle is 109 degrees 28 minutes. If the coordination number is 6, the type of hybridization may be d2sp3 inner d orbital complex and sp3 d2 outer d orbital complex. The shape becomes octahedral. So the hybridization, empty orbitals required to accommodate to form dative bonds based on the coordination number undergo hybridization. So list is there when 4 empty orbitals, sp3 hybridization or sp2 hybridization. When the coordination number is 5, the type of hybridization is sp3d. If the coordination number is 6, maybe sp3d2 or d2sp3. So inner d orbital complex is formed when strong field ligand approaches, that leads to low spin complex. When weak field ligand approaches, outer d orbital complex is formed, that is high spin complex. According to crystal field theory, between negatively charged ligand and central metal atom, ionic bond is formed. So pure ionic bond is formed between central metal atom and ligand. So ligands, when they approach the central metal atom, they can create some crystal field. Because of the crystal field, 5 d orbitals first excited into higher energy level. Those 5 d orbitals split into 2 sets. If it is octahedral complex, set of 3 orbitals, they are called T2z orbitals. Set of 2 orbitals, they are called EZ orbitals. This is called crystal field splitting. The energy gap between those two is called delta. If it is octahedral complex, delta O. If it is tetrahedral complex, delta T. This is crystal field splitting energy. After splitting into 2 sets, electrons enter into orbitals according to Aufbau principle and Hund's rule, and also Pauli's principle. If this energy is more, pairing becomes easy. So at that time, the ligand which can have more delta O value is called strong field ligand. Then forcible pairing takes place in the T2z orbitals. If the crystal field splitting energy is less than pairing energy, then electrons enter into EZ orbitals after the completion of T2z. That leads to high spin complex. So based on the delta value, ligands are divided into 2 types, strong field ligands and weak field ligands. When based on the experimentally determined delta value, if all ligands are arranged in a particular sequence, that is called spectrochemical series. So here carbon monoxide has strongest field strength. So these are considered strong field ligands. Coming to the topic polymers. Polymer is a macromolecule which is formed by the combination of number of small molecules containing multiple bonds. If you take ethylene, when ethylene is number of ethylene molecules subjected to polymerization, pi bonds are broken. Each carbon get ready to form a new bond with the adjacent molecule. So this type of repeating unit is formed. Since this is ethylene, the formed polymer is called polyethylene. Or if you take ethene, the product polymer is called polyethene. Polyethene. Classification of polymers based on the occurrence. Some occur naturally, like starch, natural polymers. Some synthetic polymers, nylon 66, they are man-made polymers. Some polymers are synthesized by taking natural polymers, they are called semi-synthetic polymers, like vulcanized rubber. Natural rubber is natural polymer. By adding sulfur to the natural polymer, we can get vulcanized rubber. So vulcanized rubber is semi-synthetic polymer. Next, based on the structure, linear polymers, branched polymers, branches are there, and cross-linked polymers, number of branches, and with the branches also chains are linked with one another to give network. They are three-dimensional network polymers. Example, bakelite. So based on the mechanism of the formation of polymer, they are divided into two types: addition polymers as well as condensation polymers. So during the condensation polymers, small molecule like H2O is eliminated. Between two monomers, monomer should be polyfunctional monomer. Minimum two functional groups must be present. Those two functional groups may be identical, may be different. So during the condensation, this is also called step growth polymers. Condensation polymers also called step growth polymers, while addition polymers are called chain growth polymers. So nylon 6,6. So two polyfunctional monomers may be subjected to condensation by the elimination of H2O. The bond formed between two monomers may be amide bond. They are called polyamides. Example, nylon 6,6. Maybe ester bond, COO bond may link two monomers. They are called polyesters like Dacron. Next, based on the type of monomers involved, they are divided into two types: homopolymers, only one type of monomers are involved; copolymers or heteropolymers, two or more than two types of monomers are participated. Next, based on the forces, intermolecular forces, they are divided into elastomers. Weakest forces of attraction are present. Stretching and contraction both are possible by applying pressure. Next, fibers, strongest forces of attraction are present. And thermoplastic polymers, the forces of attraction, intermolecular forces of attraction are intermediate between fibers and elastomers. On heat treatment, we can change the shape of the polymer. So thermosetting polymers, once it sets to particular shape, remolding is impossible. Example, bakelite. Next, from polymers chapter, what you have to do, best method, you collect the number of polymers: LDPE, HDPE, Teflon, PVC, polystyrene, polypropylene, natural rubber, neoprene, Buena-S, Buena-N, nylon 6,6, nylon 6, nylon 2,6, terylene or Dacron, bakelite, glyptol, melamine, formaldehyde resin, PHPV. Collect all types of polymers. For each polymer, what you have to do, you have to collect monomers as well as how to write the repeating unit. So in the examination, they may ask repeating unit of so and so polymer, or what are the monomers present in given monomer. So example, after that, biodegradable polymers. All natural polymers undergo degradation in the presence of bioorganisms. They are called biodegradable polymers. Synthetic also, like PHBV, nylon 2,6, they are all synthetic but biodegradable, synthetic biodegradable. Next, in order to change the properties of natural rubber, that is subjected to vulcanization. When natural rubber is heated with sulfur, we can get vulcanized rubber. The process is called vulcanization of rubber. So how to get monomers and how to write the repeating unit, I will explain by taking few examples. Let us take PVC, polyvinyl chloride. Polyvinyl chloride. This is homopolymer, only one type of monomer is present. To get monomer, you remove poly, then vinyl chloride is the monomer. So you should know what is vinyl chloride. CH2 double bond CHCl. This is called vinyl chloride. When n number of vinyl chloride molecules are subjected to polymerization, just you break the pi bond and create one valency for the carbon like this. So both must be in the square bracket. This is repeating unit of the polyvinyl chloride. I think you are able to do. Next, if it is copolymer, polybuna S rubber, polystyrene, styrene, phenylethene is called styrene, and 1,3-butadiene. So this is copolymer. So first you break the pi bond and you shift the pi bond and you break another pi bond in the 1,3-butadiene. Then you observe how to write the repeating unit. CH, looking for the bond, single bond CH. Then attach first carbon of the 1,3-butadiene CH2, shifting of the double bond taking place, double bond CH dash CH2 dash. So this is repeating unit for copolymers, addition polymers. These two are addition polymers. Coming to condensation polymers, these are condensation polymers are two types, polyesters. Two monomers are linked with each other through ester bond. Example, pterylene or dacron. So you observe how to write the repeating unit. This is formed by two types of monomers, ethylene glycol and terephthalic acid. Terephthalic acid. This is terephthalic acid. N number you take, and ethylene glycol. This is ethylene glycol. So each one is having two functional groups. During the polymerization, you remove OH and H. OH of the COOH, H of the alcoholic group you have to remove. Similarly, from terminals also, you remove OH of the COOH from left side, remove H of the OH from right side. Then CO dash COO CH2 CH2O dash. This is repeating unit. Similarly, so since n number of ester bonds are there, this is called polyester. Polyamide, example nylon 6,6. There are two monomers, each one having 6 carbons. That's why the polymer is called nylon 6,6. Hexamethylene diamine and adipic acid. Adipic acid CH2 taken 4 COOH COOH. Hexane 1,4 dioic acid. 1,6 dioic acid is adipic acid. N number plus hexamethylene diamine. Hexamethylene diamine 6 CH2 units. This is hexamethylene diamine. So during the polymerization, what happens? H comes from NH2, OH comes from COOH. So remember, always OH comes from COOH. Similarly, you remove OH of the terminal COOH and H of the terminal NH2. Then this is continuation. CH2 taken 4 times. CO. This is attached to NH of the next monomer. NH, CH2 taken 6, NH dash. So this is repeating unit. N times it is repeated. This polymer is called nylon 6,6 because in each monomer we have 6 carbons. That's why it is called nylon 6,6. So children, you remember how to write the repeating unit for condensation polymer, how to get the monomers also. From polyester, if polyester is given, how to get the monomer? Just you break CO single bond of the ester and OH attached to CO and H is attached to O. You can get alcohol from one monomer, OH, acid from another monomer. Same process when polyamide is given, how to get monomers from repeating unit. Just you break CN bond and OH attached to CO carbon and H is attached to NH. So children, these are all memory based chapters, just you go through the synopsis as many times as possible. Okay children, all the